So, Berto, for the past 14 years of this podcast, almost 15, people have been asking us to cover the case of Jodi Arias. Every couple months, someone would email or comment saying, please do a psychology of Jodi Arias. Please cover this case. And before a few months ago, when I started looking into the Casey Anthony story, I would have had really just no knowledge at all. Maybe I kind of did at one point, but certainly not at the front of my mind.
In fact, when you first asked me about it a few weeks ago, because I had heard about it and I had watched something about it, but at first I got confused and I was like, oh yeah, she killed her kids. And then on the drive home, I was like, wait a minute, no, that's that other thing.
Yeah. I started to go down a rabbit hole.
Right.
And at first I thought, well, how about I just watch one documentary, right? I'll just watch one-hour documentary. The case can't be that complicated.
Just get the overview.
And at first, I'm taking my notes and thinking about things and mulling things over as I do. And then I started to just obsess on this case. And I found, and for those of you who know the case and were following the trial in 2013, you know how fascinating, how many twists and turns there are in this case. Not only just the murder itself, the nature of the crime, the trial, the prosecutor, Jodi Arias's behavior, people around her, just so many different details that are just mind-blowing. I mean, if you had 10% of the details of this case, it would still be a fascinating story. So I had all this free time this week. I was going to get some chores done. I was maybe going to see a movie, but I have just been, for literally 16 hours a day, this is all I've been doing.
Deep dive.
Late at night, 1 in the morning, I'm watching, because the trial was recorded, like the Depp Heard trial, and it's all on YouTube. And there's so many things that happened in this trial, and it was long too. I mean, Jodi Arias herself is on the stand for 18 days.
It's crazy.
18 days she's on the stand. And there's so many things that happened and so many details and so many weird aspects. And so let's get into it. What do you say?
Let's do it.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda, and I've been obsessed with the Jodi Arias case. Who are you, Berto?
My name is Humberto Castañeda, and I raise and train transcendental meditating mantises.
So this case has so much to say about psychology as well. The Casey Anthony story, which we reviewed recently, had some things to say about psychology, but not nearly as much as this case. There's lots of data to pour over, the psychological evaluations and testimony about her at the trial, her behavior during the investigation and during the trial, all recorded, all on YouTube.
And the interviews to the press,
So, in a nutshell, for those who don't know, or people who may have forgotten some of the details, I'm going to run through a semi-quick summary of what happened in this case. It's a little long, but because there's a lot of little details, but I'm guessing these episodes, Berto, are going to be several episodes long.
Yeah.
You and I tend to talk at length anyway, and so just kind of sit back and get ready for a multi-parter. And I'm just taking a guess. So, in a nutshell, Jodi Arias and Travis Alexander had an intense dating relationship that reportedly was only about 5 months long, where they were public with their relationship.
Right. The intense part, or the official part.
The official part, right, where he was not officially dating other people.
Yeah.
He was seen with his friends, with her, because later on he would see her secretly or away from his friends, that kind of thing. But so during this relationship, very intense, lots of love, lots of attestment of love, lots of lust, lots of sexual attraction, lots of togetherness, both very much in love with each other.
Yeah.
They are in their late 20s-ish, around that. I think she's around 26, he's 29 or something around there.
They're very close, yeah.
Yeah. Jodi became obsessed with Travis. She was jealous while she was with him. She hacked into his phone, hacked into his email, hacked into his Facebook. And this is before she started stalking him. This is just
when they were together.
This is when they're together. And he's not dating anyone else. She would claim that he cheated on her, but that claim could be lumped into a lot of things that she claimed during the trial. His friends told him that they were concerned about her obsessiveness, and we'll get into the details, but eventually the friends tell him, look, you shouldn't be with her. And that prompted Travis to begin to think about leaving her, and then a couple months later, he did actually break up with her, and he moved on. But she still held on. She stalked him. She begged to see him. He would most of the time push back, but some of the times would give in, and they would see each other, and they would have sex, or they would have phone sex or something. And this was a tumultuous time, which we'll go into detail later. Then he is planning on going to Mexico, potentially with another woman, and she knew about this. He told her about it. He was open about it, and she became enraged. She seemingly around this time, or maybe before this time, but this situation really solidified it. She seemingly, allegedly made a plan to kill him at this point. And the plan involved making it seem like she never even went to his town, because they didn't live in the same state even. She lived in California.
She lived very far.
She lived in California. He lived in Arizona.
Yeah.
And so,
which was probably a relief for him, right? Because it went from this constant kind of worry, and then, okay, now she's far.
Right. And she had originally moved to Arizona to be with him because after they broke up, because she wanted to be near him and presumably stalk him more easily. But then she moved back to California. And then at this point, she made a plan to kill him and make it seem like she never even went to Arizona. She apparently convinced him to see her and for him to allow her to come over. She did one day. She had, and we'll get into the premeditation and the plan that she had for an alibi and all this stuff. And she goes to his house on June 4th, 2008. They had sex. They took pictures. He takes a shower. She takes pictures of him in the shower. She attacked him, and apparently she accidentally took a few pictures with the camera, one of which is seemingly a clear indication of her feet and the blood in his body. She apparently stabbed him 27, maybe more times. He crawled away outside the bathroom. She seemingly got on top of him and slit his throat deeply, and from ear to ear. Yeah,
they were saying like he was nearly decapitated.
Yeah. And then, by the way, we're going to get in some details, not a lot, but occasionally. And then she shot him in the head, and she dragged his body back into the shower, stuffed him in the shower, and then quickly attempted to clean up the entire house. There was blood everywhere because she was attacking him throughout basically, I think he lives in a house with two other roommates at least, and he lived in the master bedroom, and it had a master bathroom. And so they were in that area of the house. And there was blood all over the bedroom and master bathroom. She left and went to her current boyfriend's place and acted like nothing happened. A few days later, friends were worried. They basically broke into his bedroom and found the body. There was a police investigation, and they immediately started questioning her. She acted in a very odd manner, and when the police were talking to her and when the press were talking to her, she acted very nice, very sweet, very odd. She lied several times. There was a trial. Lots of testimony about PTSD and memory and borderline abuse, pedophilia, sex, etc. And like I said earlier, she testified on the stand for 18 days. And that's just some of the details of the trial, of which there are many.
Yeah. And it was highly unusual for her to testify, let alone for that long.
Right. But she did claim self-defense, and she did claim that he was abusive, which gave her reasons to believe that she needed to defend herself.
Yeah.
And also gave her, according to her, the trauma that led to her not remembering, some of the events. And in order to make that case, she's the only one that can provide any kind of witness to that. So otherwise it'd be a hard defense, I'm guessing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The Associated Press reported that the case was a quote-unquote circus and a runaway train. The case grew into a worldwide sensation as thousands followed the trial via a live, unedited web feed. Thinking back, Berto, I mean, in 2013, might this have been the first big internet trial?
Man, it's a good question because that is a big deal. Like live stream. OJ was live.
But it was on TV.
It was on TV.
It was on what it was, CNN or something.
Yeah, probably. I don't know.
Or Court TV on cable or
That's
something.
a good question. What was it? But it was live, and it was a preview of things to come. But yeah, it was interesting that's like live streamed on the internet.
Right. Yeah, and it really just raises this question as to whether or not that's a good thing. I mean, during the Depp Heard trial, there were all sorts of questions from people, including me. It's like, why does this have to be public? But what the courts and what the judge ultimately said in saying that this will be allowed to be televised is that in a high-profile case, there's a greater risk of the public believing things that aren't true about what happened behind closed doors. And so it's better to just show everyone what happened.
Call shenanigans because, number one, really, Jodi Arias, the well-known celebrity public figure, President Jodi Arias. And number two, talk about making it hard for a retrial, or if there is an appeal, like anytime you need more jurors, like who's not going to have known about it, and all the details.
Yeah, so. But I kind of get it because in a democracy-leaning society, openness of information usually is better than doing things behind closed doors. Not in all cases, of course, but the challenge is that as a society, we should be trying to advocate and really changing a culture such that publication of these details doesn't harm any individuals. Like, people involved were bullied online. And
I think it's fine if you want to record it, make it accessible through the library system or whatever. I just think that making it like a big public live stream spectacle is grotesque. But that's my opinion.
Well, why? What's grotesque about it?
Well, I mean, first of all, I feel it's naive to think that a large percentage of the viewers aren't watching it for entertainment purpose. And I feel that's gross. Like, that's gross that would be entertainment. And look, I was a participant in the OJ watching. Like, I watched that trial. I wouldn't describe what I was doing as entertainment. It was more like self-flagellation for sure. But I wish it wouldn't have been something I could have watched. It had no bearing in my life. All it did was damage me. All it did was hurt me. I don't think the public good is served by broadcasting things like this live, where it's just literally giving people like a salacious look into like horrible, horrible human behavior.
Then why are we talking about it in this podcast?
Because we have a channel about psychology, and this is like rife with psychology. It's just, we're not.
But that's my point, is like, if you can transform this as an opportunity into bad or good, then that is dependent on the content providers and the audience. So like, for instance, with the Depp Heard trial, if you just would have asked me, do you think it's a public good that we film and live stream the Depp Heard trial, and I guess also the Jodi Arias trial, I would initially say no. What would be the point in that? It's not necessary. But when I watched the Depp Heard trial, and now I guess watching the Jodi Arias trial, it gives me and others a chance to highlight what we can learn from it. And I think there's a lot to be learned from both trials.
I agree. I'm simply stating that, and like I said, so let's make it available. I think it's the spectacle that I'm opposing, not the fact that the data is available. It's like, for example, with Senate hearings, Congress hearings, I'm all for it. Like, absolutely, broadcast the heck out of that, right? The public needs to know. That is in the public interest. I guess I would need to hear more good reasons why a private individual's trial and family's trial is so important that everyone must see it live streamed on the internet.
Yeah, I think a greater argument could be made about the Depp Heard trial. I mean, that was a civil case.
Yeah.
There was no crime.
Yeah, fair enough.
Whereas this one, you're like, well, I mean, you have someone that ultimately was found guilty of first-degree murder. Yeah. And does this person deserve that kind of dignity or privacy? And you could probably say not necessarily.
There's something that I actually don't think is helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I tend to agree. Yeah. But when I hear lawyers and judges advocate for it being public, along with a lot of other things like the hearings or the actions of Congress, badge cams, it's like, okay, do we as a public misinterpret or use the data to harm other people, yes. But that doesn't necessarily mean we become an information blocking state. Do you know what I mean? But and we'll get into that later in terms of why was this case so salacious and so interesting? Why is it so interesting to me? I mean, did you find it really interesting?
Yes. Fascinating, compelling, bizarre, all of the above.
Yeah. And there's a lot of theories that we'll get into as to, I think, why that is for us. The Toronto Star wrote that with its mix of jealousy, so they're talking about the case, with its mix of jealousy, religion, murder, and sex, the Jodi Arias case shows what happens when the justice system becomes entertainment. Also, she was the most hated woman in America around the same time that Casey Anthony was the most
It's
hated.
weird that the timing was...
And Jodi was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, and she is still there. So, Berto, I want to pause there and say that the rest of this episode is just going to be for patrons of the podcast. Mm-hmm. This isn't what I usually do with our episodes, but I feel like if my efforts and my... sometimes I gauge whether or not something should be a deep dive by how much effort I put into it.
Sure.
And this is one of those episodes where I put a lot of effort into it. And I just wondered if I would, if I could reward the patrons for actually being a patron. We could not be doing any of this stuff, Berto,
without the patrons.
The microphone that you're speaking into, the microphone I'm speaking into, the computer screen I'm using here, the chair you're sitting in, so many things involved in this podcast.
The visual I have is everything you just alluded to are actual patrons. Like there's a little patron here I'm talking into, and there's a patron on.
Some of our long-term patrons have been long enough that you could actually attribute that microphone to one particular patron. It's probably like 2 or 3 that bought that chair. But so yeah, the rest, this is going to be a multi-parter. So I think what I'm going to do is every part will have a free portion that we'll intro with, and then we'll launch into the rest. So if you want to listen to this episode, in this episode, at least I'm going to start the chronology of everything, which is pretty interesting. I'm going to go through Jodi Arias' childhood, a little bit of Travis's childhood as well, and then go through the events, the relationship, the love bombing, the stalking, the actual murder. And so if you want to hear it, become a patron of the podcast by going to patreon.com. Then you can hear this episode and hundreds of other of our best episodes of all time. Why should people become patrons, Bruno?
They should do it because the information contained within the patron world is magical, mystical, never before seen in the history of humanity. And we have episodes too. Plus, they can be part of supporting this, which is great. Like, I am a patron of several things. Like, I patron my own things that I follow. And it feels great because I know that I like their content, and I'm a little part of making that content survive. Mm-hmm. So, you get this personal reward of feeling like you're helping the thing you like survive.
Yeah, it's great when I become a patron of things or contribute to them directly. They're usually small outfits that I know exactly where the money is going.
Right.
When you give money to NPR or something, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, but, it's a large organization. You don't know exactly. Well, when you give money to us, it literally is directly paying my bills. That's exactly where it's going. It is paying my bills so that I don't have to get another job.
Right.
I don't have to work at the university anymore.
And that's the thing you feel. Like, it's similar to when you kickstart a thing that you really care passionately about, that you're like, I want this to succeed. And anything I can do to help this succeed, let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if that doesn't convince you, then nothing else will. And take care of yourself because
you deserve it.